Hi, I'm Lynn Wheeler here interviewing Jeff Kimble, who was the principal here at the old New Windsor Middle School. And we are now in that building, which has been renovated for the next century to be the library headquarters. And we are delighted to be talking to you, Jeff, and sharing your memories of this wonderful community and this school. Tell us how you first came to Carroll County.
Well, my wife and I are both from Western Pennsylvania. I was raised in the Pittsburgh, north side of Pittsburgh. My wife was from a little town called Indiana, Pennsylvania, where Indiana University of Pennsylvania is, and that's where I did my undergraduate work. We met one summer, then we got married, and we came to Carroll County because it was the only place that we interviewed for jobs, that we both got jobs in the same school system. So that's why we came down to Carroll County. And my wife had never been here. She had never seen the place. I came down and interviewed. She was interviewed up in Pennsylvania. And she had never seen Carroll County at all, or Westminster. And so when we moved in, we got in late on a Friday night, and I told her I'd take her for a ride on Saturday morning. And Saturday morning, we got up and we rode down Main Street and got to Railroad Avenue. Came across two tractors pulling hay wagons full of hay in front of us. And of course, she started crying and saying she wanted to quit and go back. I told her we couldn't quit and go back, that we had to stay because we signed a contract. Now we cry because we don't see those same hay wagons and things on Main Street anymore. And we've been here now for 41 years, so this has been a great place. We raised two children here. We now have some grandchildren that will be going. One's in high school now at North Carroll, and our youngest two will be going to school in the Carroll County system, which we feel is a very, very, very good school system.
That's wonderful. Where did you teach when you first came?
My first job was at Sykesville Middle School, where I taught social studies, and I was there for 2 years. And I left teaching after 2 years and went to work for a pharmaceutical company. But after 1 year of realizing that I wasn't a very good salesman, and we decided to come back, and we chose to come back to Carroll County. And once again, we both got jobs, only this time I moved from Sykesville Middle School, where I taught for my first 2 years, to New Windsor Middle School. Mm-hmm. And that was my first experience at New Windsor.
Uh-huh. And tell us about that experience in the school.
Well, it's kind of interesting because Sykesville Middle, the same as New Windsor Middle, was an old high school. In fact, more than a high school. They were elementary, junior, and senior high schools. Now, Sykesville was a little bit larger than New Windsor, and the building, I think, was a little newer and in a little better shape. So when I first came, I remember looking at the school saying, wow. And I taught my first 2 years, I taught sixth grade social studies. And then my second 2 years here, I taught in the eighth grade history class or social studies. And that's when I became, during that period of time, I went to Western Maryland, now McDaniel College, and got my master's degree in administration and moved into administration as assistant principal and moved from here to East Middle School.
Well, now, one of your principals when you were here, Buzz Lambert, reports that you were a very, very creative teacher, and you created a solar heating system for your classroom because it was so cold.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how we did that, but and you know, the kids participated in that a lot, and we were down on the bottom floor, down on the Route 75 hallway, and right by the doorway, and the entrance where the kids came in the bus, and it was chilly, so I wish I could remember exactly how we did that, but it worked. It helped a lot. And you know, like Buzz said, he was my principal here for 4 years before I moved on, and a very good administrator. I learned a lot from him. I was very fortunate to have a lot of good administrators I worked under. Ed Schilling, who was a superintendent, Bill Ecker, who was a superintendent, Buzzy Lambert, Don Reck, who I learned an awful lot from.
Well, he certainly was delighted to have you as on the faculty. That's
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, what was your impression of the community when you first came here?
Well, it was kind of rural for me. Like I said, I grew up in the north side of Pittsburgh, and you know, not used to farm country and driving. Like I remember driving out here, coming down Route 31, coming past all the farms back in those days, and the cows and the sheep and other types of animals out there grazing and everything. And of course, I was always going against traffic because people from the New Windsor area and the Union Bridge area were going towards Westminster. So it was a very scenic ride, a very delightful ride in the morning. And of course, the community itself was much more rural. There weren't as many shops, there weren't as many restaurants and things of that nature. But it's a very, very nice community, very low-keyed, fantastic group of people to work with.
Mm-hmm. And you had students who worked on the farm?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget one day a gentleman coming and knocking on the door. I can't remember his name right now, but saying he needed to have his 2 sons to help him go out and pick cotton, or not cotton, but go out and pick some corn, because the corn harvest was getting ready. So, of course, where I went to school, no one even knew what that was. So it was kind of interesting. But we let them go, and we had kids. The kids, a lot of them were 4-H kids, involved in the 4-H and things of that nature. So. It's a very, very interesting and nice community.
Yes, that really is interesting. Does that differentiate this school from the others where you had worked, the rural nature of it? Other things that differentiated it in your mind?
Yeah, that was the main. Although, like I said, Sykesville at the time when I first came was a little more rural than what I was used to, but not quite as rural as the New Windsor. Union Bridge area, and of course Tawnytown. When I was in Tawnytown, it's a little larger also, and although there's still some farming out there too. So there's farming all over Carroll County.
Yes.
Not as much today as there was, but still a lot of farming, and so the communities were kind of similar, but there were the people in this area were more rural than urban. Mm-hmm. Especially when I moved from Westminster to become a principal at New Windsor Middle School, coming from East Middle School, the much more rural people out here.
Well, tell us some of your memories of the students that went here, some of the specific memories of students.
Well, we had quite a diversified population. Students that were very, very well behaved. I remember one day walking down the hallway towards the 6th grade area, and a woman came in the door with her 2 children. They were looking at a house in the area, knowing that this would be the school that they went to, and they wanted to see what the school was like. And I said, "Can I help you?" I told them who I was, that I was the principal, and they said, "Yeah." They said, "We would really like to visit the school, but we wanted to come when school was in session, not closed for the day." I said, "Well, it is in session." She said, "What?" She said, "So quiet." I said, "Sure." I said, "Come here." And I walked down and opened up Mrs. Case, who was a 6th grade language arts teacher, opened up her door, and sure enough, there were 25 to 30 kids in there working very quietly and very hard. Then went to Mrs. Harrison, who was a social studies, and went to all the doors and opened them, and all these kids were just working so quietly that she just couldn't amaze. She was just totally amazed at how quiet they were and how attentive they were to what they were doing.
That is wonderful.
And that's the kind of kids we had, for the most part. We did have, like any other school, we had some kids that were problems, but nothing like I'd seen at other schools that I worked at.
That's really wonderful. Now, you had some pretty good athletes in this school, isn't that right?
Yeah. Craig Green was a very good athlete. It goes back a long way, and I can't remember a lot of names, but I know that because I also refereed football. A lot of the kids then went to Key High School, and I'd referee their football games, and they were good. There were a lot of good athletes that went to Key, and then later on, as the district changed. When I first came to New Windsor Middle School as a principal, we basically drew kids from Union Bridge and New Windsor down towards down towards Taylorsville, but not in the Taylorsville area, more in the Medford area, and out Uniontown Road area. But then there was some redistricting done, and we started getting kids from the Taylorsville area, and also some from the Middle town area that had normally gone to Northwest Middle School.
Wow.
So we got a different type of population. So the school, it changed in that respect, that the districting changed, and we got kids from other areas.
Now, Jeff, you opened the new middle school? Tell us about that experience.
That was fantastic. It was very difficult. We had a very good committee here of the faculty, a number of the faculty. Mrs. Zepp, who was a media specialist, Mrs. Potts, who was a phys ed teacher, a couple other teachers who I don't really remember right now who they were, but there was like 5 teachers on the staff of me, and then the people from central office who were in the building area that built. And the neatest thing about it was I got to travel a little bit and go to other school districts. I went to Frederick County. I went down into Virginia to Harrisonburg, Virginia. Not Harrisonburg.
Fredericksburg.
I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's not that far south of D.C., where they were building a new middle school, and up into Pennsylvania. And I got to go to these different places, and sometimes the supervisor, like the phys ed supervisor, would go with me, or the home economics supervisor and the tech ed supervisor would go with me and look at these places. And we got to put all these ideas together, and we took ideas from all these different schools and put them together. One of the things I remember the most was when we built the new school, we had the gym and then a 2-sided stage, and then a cafeteria on the other side of the 2-sided stage. So if we had a small program, we would use the cafeteria. If we had a large program, we would use the gymnasium as the auditorium. But the stage opened to both sides. And the expansion of the technology departments, having computers in all the science rooms. Each pair of students had a computer in their science room that they would do their lab work on and things on, and a computer lab. And of course, today it's even more great as you go into new schools. But it was a really nice experience getting to build that school.
What was it like when you actually had to close down this school and move in there?
For a lot of us, it was very difficult. When Mr. Lambert was here, and this was back in the early 70s, we had a lot of the same faculty that when I came back as the principal, a lot of the people still, Mr. McCurack in the 6th grade, Miss Black in the 6th grade, Mr. Geisbert's 7th grade, Mrs. Moore up in the 8th grade. A lot of the same, Mrs. Blueball, a lot of the same faculty was here that was here when Mr. Lambert was here. In fact, some of them are still at the new building.
Wow.
I know Mr. McCurack and Miss Harrison still work there. Mr. Cromer, a phys ed teacher. But the faculty, one of the things that I've always admired about New Windsor Middle School was the faculty. When I came as a teacher, very energetic faculty, very student-oriented faculty, loved to have the kids involved in things they did. Just a very good faculty. When I came back as the administrator, as the principal, it was the same way. We it helped me as an administrator to have people like that working for me and working with the students, because they were so child and student oriented and wanted the best for the kids. So they're very good faculty. And like I said, a number of them are still working there.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. It's wonderful to have this history of the New Windsor School area, and to know what wonderful schools and teachers and administrators we have in Carroll County schools.
Well, I'm glad I could come. I've been by the building a number of times and seen the outside. I have never seen the inside. And I walked in the door and thought, wow, an elevator? And in those back in the old days, those steps down at that hallway and this hallway all the way up, and you could get a little tired walking up there after lunch, going all the way up to the 3rd floor. Now there's an elevator, so that was really neat. And just the change as I walked through and looked at some of things like my old classroom down in the 6th grade and my old classroom upstairs in the 8th grade. And as I was telling the cameraman earlier, this office that we're sitting in now, we could have put my secretary, my assistant principals, and me in the same size. I mean, we were all would have been in this one area. So it's really exciting, and I think you're going to have a wonderful facility to work out of.
Well, thank you. We realized just being here in this brief time that how much it means to the community to have saved this wonderful building, and so we're glad to be a part of that.
Well, we're glad. My wife and I both said we're glad to see it put to some good use after all those years.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.